Hello everyone, and this is our third video for the course, your weekly update for February 3rd. In this video I'm just going to talk a little bit about the last assignments you did this week and give you a little heads up on your upcoming assignments as well. So this week for me you completed the Browsing Communication Research assignment. This assignment should have taken you probably less than an hour to complete. If it took you a lot more than that, then you may have done something not quite like I wanted you to. So if you're finding that that's the case and the assignments are, way more difficult than my estimated time, please get a hold of me and maybe I can give you some tips or ideas about what the issue might be. A few things about this assignment. One of the reasons that I had you choose these specific journals to look at was because they fit well with the different areas or concentrations within the department and the kinds of research and topics of study that you might engage with in those different areas. So, while there are tons of different communication journals that I could have picked, I picked those ones specifically because I think they also help give you an idea about the kinds of things we might study in this department specifically. So that's, sort of each part of an assignment is chosen for a specific reason. So just make sure you're following the guidelines as you read through them. I know that they can be wordy, but in an online class, I feel it's always better to have too much detail than too little. So if you're just reading through those carefully and following what they say, you should be good. You were asked to do the APA citations. Actually, a number of you have really great citations already at this moment. I didn't comment on whether your citations were correct or not. I will start commenting on those in the next assignment and the one after that. I won't grade whether your citations are correct or not until after the week that we cover citations. But it's always a good practice to start looking that stuff up now. If you don't know what I'm talking about or, you want to get some practice, OWL, as in the bird, OWL, Purdue, is a really good website that we'll be using in this class as a style guide. So you can always use that to look up how to cite an article. As many of you mentioned, another purpose of this assignment was, to have you start getting used to using the BSU virtual library. Everything should have been found through BSU and should have been available to you through our BSU library website. There was a video on the assignment guidelines if you needed some additional help. I would suggest, if you don't really have a lot of familiarity with using the library to look things up, those videos are there for your use. I would recommend using them. It's 5 minutes and it could really explain a lot. The other reason that I wanted you to do this assignment was just so that you got a sense of the kinds of topics that communication scholars are interested in. Many of you noted that, it can be quite broad and varying, that researchers and scholars are often focused on specific problems or contemporary issues, and that many of you were able to find articles where the titles and abstracts really did seem interesting to you. Other people mentioned that these kinds of articles can be very detailed, complex, in-depth. They might be using vocabulary or kind of structure that you don't quite understand yet. Some people actually went to the articles themselves and noticed a lot of references. I think a few things to keep in mind is they are detailed, complex, and in-depth. They have a ton of references. It's not the kind of thing you're typically used to reading, and it may be very confusing to you at first. In fact, I think for most of you, it should be. Scholarly articles are written for other scholars, other experts in the field, people who have studied these topics for, decades. So you're just now starting your work in becoming an expert within communication studies, and so some of these will be very hard. That is why we'll be spending a lot of time in this class learning how to read those, how to dissect them, how to better understand what it is you're reading. And this is the first class in a series of 3 research and writing courses you'll take. So, we're just going to get started in this class. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind. If you're finding that the work is really confusing, it's not a deficiency on your part. It's because it is confusing. You're not expected to totally understand all of this at this moment in time. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of overview about sort of why I had you do that and hopefully what you were able to get out of that. You also had a group discussion for me around the idea of fake news. So a few things here. One is the discussion was excellent. I really liked reading what you guys had written. I thought that people had really great points to bring up. One of the things you should know is this idea of fake news is the broad topic we'll be exploring throughout the whole course. And it is the idea that many of your assignments will kind of touch on, and many of our extended reading assignments will be from articles that address some aspects of fake news, and you will be expected to write your final paper in this class on some kind of topic related to fake news. So as we go through these things, really be paying attention to what you're reading, and it'll help you with that final paper as well. Some of the questions that the discussion leaders brought up in relationship to fake news were really excellent. They're the kinds of questions scholars would even ask about this broad area. Like, do people even care if they're reading fake or accurate information, was one of the questions. I think, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but I think that's a really good question. I don't know, some people had some really good ideas about that. Another of your discussion leaders asked if social media itself wasn't really part of the main problem here. I think that's also a question that a lot of scholars are looking into right now. News circulates and is disseminated and read in very different ways because of the new media technologies that we are engaged with. How is that changing the way we read news, the way we share news, the way we might assess or evaluate news? Is social media really at the root of some of these problems? One discussion leader asked, why are we even using this term right now? Why has it become so popular? That's a super excellent question, and actually a number of the readings that we're going to approach this semester will start to dig into that as well. And then I really like this last question is sort of like, if we're thinking about fake news in relationship to information literacy and how we teach people to be informed and evaluate information, could it be the way that we have addressed priorities in our educational system, i.e. standardized testing, have gotten in the way of things like life skills or other kinds of skills like information literacy? So that question I bring up in part I think is great because it shows you the way in which one topic, like fake news, can branch into all kinds of other areas, right? So when I say our umbrella term, our umbrella that we're going to look into for the class is fake news, you're going to write a paper that touches on that in some way, but it might be in this kind of way. How does something else relate to this idea of fake news is one way to think about that. And then in general, I think throughout the discussion, we see the kind of critical analysis that it's important that we're able to bring to everything we read. And this pushes us to ask certain questions. In this case, questions about, well, who is this article talking about? What is the real issue when we think about fake news? And, why do we think this is happening? And people brought up a number of different kinds of options, right? So I think I even brought up the question, we often think of like children as people who are unable to discern fake news from real news, or they're the ones who aren't good at evaluating news. And this article sort of makes that assumption too in the way that it studies and approaches its research design. But is that really fair? Is it really teenagers? Are they any worse than, say, boomers? A lot of research now is starting to examine that and saying, actually, no. Maybe we're all bad at it. Maybe it has nothing to do with our age or even our learning. Is it related particularly to Democrats or Republicans? Some researchers are looking into those kinds of issues as well. And we can ask, well, what do we even mean by fake news? Is it really just clickbait? Or is it ignorance, as this article seems to suggest? Or is it social media, as we asked before? And there are a lot of different ways to ask those questions. And when we ask, well, what is it really? We start to get into the meat of bringing up other issues that are related to this as well. And then also why? So if we agree that fake news is a problem, well, why is it a problem? Where does it stem from? Is it social media? Is it media companies themselves? Do they have a responsibility to try to curb this issue? Is it individuals? We just need to become better evaluators. Is it schools or teachers that they have to be the ones who take the lead of teaching us? Is it this heightened partisanship that exists in our democracy today that makes us more entrenched in our views? Is it the fact that we just have way too much information thrown at us, information overload, so we get sick of trying to even figure out what's true or not? Is it AI, artificial intelligence, and the different filtering systems that get used that basically help us to live in our own information bubbles? Or is it disinterest? We just don't really care. I think really exploring these and asking these kinds of questions is the way that scholars move toward more complex responses toward, issues that we're dealing with in our everyday lives. So these were also all questions that you had brought up in other ways throughout your conversations. So I hope that you kind of continue these conversations both with each other and in your head as we move through this literature. And I wanted to just bring up that when scholars ask these kinds of questions, their responses to these, the point is to be able to give us a more complex or nuanced or deeper understanding about these topic areas. And it comes through one of two different ways, either through an analysis of facts and statistics, so different kinds of data or research that we do can give us a different perspective on some of these things. So like I mentioned, is it just young people or is it actually everyone? Facts and statistics can help us to figure that out. But also theory itself, or ideas or analysis, can also deepen a kind of view. And I'll just bring up one example to illustrate this. One communication theorist named James Carey, he analyzed news itself and really asked the question is, do we really engage with news because we want to find out information in society? Or do we really engage with news because it gives us a picture of our belonging in the world? And if we think about it in that way, and his answer was that, a lot of times we read the news because it tells us where we fit into society and it reinforces our beliefs and our values. When we think about news in that way, it really shifts the way we think about fake news, that maybe fake news is not really about misinformation, but it's about solidifying our tribes and who we feel like we belong with. So when we share something that might be fake news, it's not really about the information that's in there. It's sort of a explanation of sort of what our values are and who we think we are and who we think we fit with. So it gives us another way of sort of thinking about the issue. So theories can work that way as well. Really quickly, I just want to give a heads up on what's coming up next week. This week, we start moving into our Unit 2, which is all about finding and evaluating sources. You have a discussion board that will be due. Make sure you check Blackboard for who the discussion leaders are. You'll have another assignment to complete for me called Understanding Sources. It should take you about an hour to get done. And this is the first time you're going to be asked to present a really short paragraph on topic ideas. So thinking about, what you know about fake news, the little bits of conversation we've had about fake news already, really thinking in your own mind, is there kind of a direction that you're interested in exploring, or what are some of your ideas? How do you want to take this idea of fake news and fit it into a topic that you'd like to look at more in this class? So that's just one quick paragraph I'm asking you to submit through a kind of discussion board area. And those are what your assignments are for this upcoming week.